So in our first installment of Tech Bros completely missing the point of a fantasy franchise, Palantir, owned and operated by Peter Thiel. And yes, we'll talk about Alex Karp too, just settle down. First, for the uninitiated, the Palantiri, or Palantir in the singular. The Palantiri were created by the Noldor, one of the three main branches of elves residing in Arda, and they were especially known for their craftsmanship. The Silmarillion does not talk explicitly about who created the Palantiri, but it was likely Fëanor or one of his sons. The Palantiri's magic is interesting. They sort of function as communication devices, first of all. So if one person has a Palantir and someone else has a Palantir, they can communicate with each other. But they also serve sort of a fortune telling or image conjuring function as well. So one could look into a Palantir and perhaps see the future or the past. It's actually very similar to Galadriel's magic, and she's an Noldor, so this makes sense. In the Fellowship of the Ring, when she shows Frodo her mirror and says it will show you things that were, things that are, and some things that have not yet come to pass. The Palantiri were gifted by the Noldor to the Kingdom of Numenor in the Second Age. This is the Kingdom of Men. Numenor was basically the Arda Atlantis. When the Numenorian kingdom fell in the Second Age, they landed on Middle-earth and they brought the Palantiri with them. Elendil was the head of the Numenorians at that time, so his family, including his sons Isildur and Anarion, controlled the Palantiri. And eventually their descendant Aragorn, son of Arathorn, became the rightful heir of the Palantiri. By the time Aragorn comes around, the Palantiri have mostly disappeared. A lot of them have been broken, destroyed, lost, but a couple remain. We know that one was in Minas Ithil before it became Minas Morgul. This is the stronghold that borders Mordor, and that's the one that Sauron ends up controlling. And then another one is in Isengard, or Orthanc, which is the tower in there, and it comes under Saruman's control. And you'll recall that Saruman actually became corrupted via the Palantir. It really ended up striking a lot of fear into Saruman, and that's why he started creating his military-industrial complex. I could go on, but suffice to say, the Palantiri require three things. It requires birthright, so the only ones who have really able to use the Palantiri without being corrupted are the heirs of Numenor. 2, it requires wisdom. Since you didn't know exactly what you were looking at every time you used a Palantir, you had to be very careful about what you decided you were seeing. And 3, the power is very easily corrupted and corruptible. So Sauron obviously came at it with evil intentions. He immediately uses it to start corrupting others around him. And Saruman came to it with maybe better intentions, but because he had no wisdom and because he wasn't a rightful heir, he ends up being corrupted by what he sees in the Palantir. The Palantiri themselves are fairly neutral, and it really is in the wielder for what ends up happening with them and how they are used. Fun fact, and then I'll stop nerding out, there was actually a king of Numenor, Tar Palantir, and he was called that because he was so wise and far-seeing, and he was actually the one who predicted the fall of Numenor. And now we come to Peter Thiel, who apparently read all of this and thought, let me create a super spy tech company that will absorb everybody's data into one place, because that couldn't possibly go wrong. So Palantir specializes in logic modeling, AI, and data gathering. Massive amounts of data gathering. And just like the Palantiri, data is fairly neutral, but its use can be used for good and evil. So let's look at what Peter Thiel and his colleagues have been up to with these Palantiri recently. It kind of all starts with this executive order on March 20th from President Trump, stopping waste, fraud, and abuse by eliminating information silos. Like all of his EOs, sounds really great on the surface, but the implications quickly become pretty menacing. Since then, ICE has awarded Palantir $30 million to come up with a system that will provide them near real-time visibility of migrants, especially the ones who are self-deporting. Palantir has infiltrated the IRS via Doge. Yep, that's what Elon Musk has been doing all these months. And not government related, but just as concerning, they recently partnered with the Joint Commission, which is a separate private nonprofit that does healthcare information and accreditation type work for over 27,000 healthcare providers. And their aim with Palantir is to create an API that overlays all of their data so that they can utilize it better. And in case you're wondering if we're possibly dealing with an Aragorn who would be the rightful heir to this data and have the ability to use it wisely, I'm unfortunately here to tell you that we are indeed dealing with a Saruman at best and a Sauron at worst. Alex Karp, the CEO of Palantir, loves to talk about unaliving people a lot. Beheading, just the warrior kingsmanship. He likes to talk about how we're going to claim victory for the West It's very strange. What's even wilder is that we do have a naysayer from the Republican Party against Palantir. I'm talking about Warren Davidson, a congressman from Ohio, and he is a MAGA. He came up with Trump derangement syndrome, but he actually made a Lord of the Rings reference in a response to Palantir's reach into all of this government data. He compared this government database to the One Ring to rule them all and says, quote, "The only good thing to do with the One Ring to rule them all is to destroy the ring." I don't like Warren Davidson, but on this he and I see eye to eye. Pun intended. So yes, when you hear rumors to the New York Times that Trump has tapped Palantir to create a database on all Americans, you should be concerned. Palantir and its staff are not the rightful heirs of this data. They do not have good intentions with it, and they do not know how to use it wisely. You need to push back as much as you can. Be cognizant of where and how much data is out there that could identify you. Tell your representatives how you feel about this. Make sure they know the name Palantir and Peter Thiel. That's all for this week, thank God. Next time, we're going to cover Anduril, a military weapons company named after a sword that defeated the very forces of evil in the Second Age. Until then, Namarie Melon.